one of the things that jumped out to me to start, we're so lucky in this country to have first responders, EMT technicians. There's so many people. We've dealt with so much in this country from a health standpoint over the last couple of years. And tip of the cap to all those people in this country that are always on the spot. Every NFL stadium has multiple EMTs, first responders, and they are more than capable, and we hope saved a man's life last night. I want to start with this. So often, I've probably been guilty of this, we complain about roughing the passer, the targeting rules, and the quick ejections in college football. And the reason the league implements those is because of last night. About, I think 6 months ago, Roger Goodell wasn't quoted, but somebody wrote a wonderful article about sort of the depth and the concerns of the safety of this sport. And that the greatest fear, whether it's the commissioner of NASCAR or a promoter in boxing or Roger Goodell, last night is everybody's greatest fear. Football is much safer than even 10, 15 years ago. But it's football. It's large, fast men running full speed, tackling one another. And they're getting bigger, and they're getting stronger, and they're getting faster. I see pictures from time to time on the internet of high school football players who are 235 pounds and ripped. And I think, wow, could he tackle my son? It's scary out there. Practices, though, have been cut back. There's less hitting in practices. I had a college football coach tell me years ago, once the season starts, they don't hit much at practice anymore. The equipment's getting better. There are regulations everywhere. But, and this is something the NFL and all football, but let's talk NFL today, has to look itself in the mirror. Do we really need a 17th regular season game? I don't like it. It benefits me because it extends the season. But I said it when I came out. You can't tell me safety's number one and add a 17th game. Thursday night football. I enjoy it. But do we need players playing fatigued? Anybody who's ever ran a marathon or been athletic or skied, the accidents always happen when your muscles are most fatigued. I don't understand preseason football. I've been railing on that. Many of you don't get it either. College football doesn't have it. It's just another 150 collisions for the athletes. If safety really matters, then we don't need Thursday night football. Then we don't need a preseason. The league has taken steps, lots of them. But UFC, car racing, football, boxing, hell, even baseball, they throw a 100-mile-an-hour pitch. Seemingly, you watch a baseball game, everybody throws like 98 miles an hour. Used to be high 80s, low 90s. Now people are getting over 100 miles an hour. It's a small ball, sometimes thrown in the wrong places. Sports is scary at times. I did think the NFL got it right, and hear me out on this. Anytime you have a crisis, communication is hard. It could be in the cockpit of a plane. It could be during a flood. It's hard. People are panicking. People are scared. This was unprecedented. I also think they got it right. Maybe not on my timeline. I would have called it sooner. Maybe they did call it sooner, and it took 7, 8, 9 minutes to get down to everybody to hear it. I don't know. The European Soccer Championships a couple of years ago, Christian Eriksen, a wonderful player, collapsed. Once he was stabilized at a hospital, the game continued on. That seems completely inappropriate to me. Years ago, when Vince McMahon ran the WWE, a wrestler died. They continued the show. That's gross. Troy Vincent did come out and say the NFL did not consider giving players 5 minutes. Now, some people, I think, were confused. I was, because I saw Joe Burrow warm up with a couple of passes. But players weren't warming up. Players were crying. Players were shocked. And they should have been. It's unprecedented. Joe Buck, Troy Aikman have been doing this for years. They didn't know what to say. Nobody knew what to say. The other thing that I thought about this morning is a lot of people are rightly giving credit to Sean McDermott or Zach Taylor because the coaches may have made the ultimate decision. And we all think to ourselves, why didn't the commissioner? But you know how it works sometimes. The president calls a governor, calls a mayor, calls the Peace Corps, calls the National Guard in communication. Who's on the ground? Who's there? Sean McDermott's listening to his players. He's watching his players cry. It's okay to me to lean in as a sport. Lean into the people on the scene. They know what's happening. They know what's going on. They're seeing their players sob, not somebody watching on a camera in New York City. The people in Cincinnati knew how serious it was, and Sean McDermott had his arm around those players. It's okay to lean on him. Sean, what's going on? Tell us, what do you think? I think out of respect for the family, last night's a tie. Right? We don't want to play this thing. We have ties in football. And they exist, and this will be a tie. It's out of respect for the family and his health. We make exceptions all the time. In fact, I think baseball decided recently they were just going to use more tiebreakers because they couldn't find a spot to play extra games, play-in games. This is a tie, out of respect to the family and the moment. I say, once or twice a year I'll say this, love your life like your sports. And the reason I've said that for years is to have perspective on it. And I think last night, wow, tip of the hat to all the people at the network I used to work at. I thought they were all terrific. Scott Van Pelt. I don't know Booger McFarland. I know Scott. I know Joe and Troy. Great. The people in the truck. They just did unbelievable work. But let's pray. I've said this before, is that I was a pretty squirrely, immature kid, 17, 18, 19, 20, into college. One of the things you're finding out about Damar Hamlin is the charity, the toy drive he's been part of. I don't go to as many games as I used to, but when I was local in Tampa or Portland, Oregon, or Las Vegas, there would often be toy drives. I think Rasheed Wallace in Portland did a coat drive. I'm always amazed at how much athletes give back. Obviously, we pay or we watch, and they're entertaining us. But last night is a stark reminder that we also have to protect them. They give a ton to our communities. All my years of doing this, I'm taken back how lucky these leagues are to have these young people who are so committed. I mean, a football season ends, and if you take 3 weeks off, you're almost shamed. You have to get back in practice. They work so hard. A college player getting ready for the pros, he'll go to Florida and Phoenix the minute his season is over and train right into a professional OTA. That's why many rookie players by week 13 or 14 are more prone to injury and exhaustion. They call it hitting a wall because they've literally gone a year straight. No time off, no vacation, no resting your body, trying to be a professional. So much of what makes sports gripping is the good emotion. I've been watching some of these bowl games, and I don't even know any of these players, and they're so emotional, and my heart goes out to a kid who misses a kick. So it's understood. I was sick to my stomach last night. I just was sick to my stomach. I did not want to go on social media. I didn't have anything I could add. Disappointed by some of the stuff I saw. But in the end, this is a stark reminder that athletes are not just here for our entertainment. They have to be protected at whatever costs it take. Now, it's football. It's really fast and it's really strong. But this is why they put in those roughing the passer penalties, and this is why they put in all these regulations. This is exactly why. This is the greatest fear for anybody who loves sports. We've all thought about this. I saw something at a college game yesterday where a football player for Tulane was knocked out. And I mean, I just felt sick. So we're all crossing our fingers. We're hoping for very good news. I didn't race to social media. I didn't think I had a ton to add. Like all of you, I was just sick to my stomach watching it. Again, I think the people that had to broadcast it live were tremendous. I also think it is okay for Sean McDermott and Zach Taylor, specifically Sean McDermott, who's been in this league a while now as an assistant coordinator and a head coach. I think the league probably did lean on him a little bit, feet on the ground with his players. I go back to thinking how terrifying it would have been. There was a cardiac arrest, so you had somebody on top of that player. And for the record, I've only seen that happen once in my life in anything. Cardiac arrest happening live and first responders on the scene trying to revive them. It is a terrifying sight. I saw it actually a year ago skiing, and there was a big collision. Helicopters swooped in, and I watched first responders perform. It was a day for me. I was done. It was a terrifying sight. So the players saw that. So when you see Josh Allen crying and these players, there's just no way you can play that game. There's just absolutely no way. The NFL eventually got it right, but it's hard. It's hard. That kind of stuff in crisis. I've been very fortunate in my life. I haven't been in crisis a lot. But what those players are seeing and what they're hearing, you can see these pictures. I mean, this stuff is tough. And it happens infrequently. That's why we make the game as safe as we possibly can. Athletes are getting bigger and stronger. So Damar Hamlin remains in critical condition in a hospital. Football is, they could make it safer. They could reduce the number of games. It is football. I never really understood. Football is a very unique sport. There are guys that have played at the NFL and have been great players who didn't play high school football and didn't play college football. Antonio Gates for the Chargers, Hall of Fame tight end, will be. He was a college basketball player. So unlike, let's say, golf, or pitching in baseball, where you really need experience and reps. A lot of the things in football, a lot of football coaches that recruit like their athletes to play multiple sports because they believe they can get better at things like hand-eye coordination, not playing football. So the idea that you have to hit at 12, 13 years old is nonsense. That's just not the case. In fact, one of the moments that really changed how I sort of looked at the preseason, I always love when you get what they call disruptors, when somebody comes in and says, I'm not going to do it that way, I'm going to do it my way. And years ago, Sean McVay was this young 30-year-old coach, came into the NFL and said, I'm not going to play any of my starters in the preseason. Why would I do that? Why would I have an older player in collisions? And people really push back. You have to do this. It's very important. The Rams started the season 8-0. There's no reason to have preseason. You could have inter-squad games for some intense urgency. There's no reason to have preseason games. They're a ripoff to fans. College kids don't do it, and college kids are 18, 19 years old. They have class. They can only practice at college 17 hours a week, according to the NCAA. And I watch the early games in September. The kids are ready to play. So why do 30-year-olds need 3 more games of hitting? I do not believe that's good. I don't want to sit on a soapbox this morning. I don't like a 17th game. I've defended Thursday night football. You could certainly get rid of that. But I think fewer games, less hitting does not take away from the beauty and skill of the sport. That is my takeaway. I'm not here to be a hall monitor of all sports. Very capable people make decisions. Football Morning in America, it's NBC Sports, it's Peter King. His perspective will be noteworthy this morning. I was saying this earlier, Peter. I do remember the Darryl Stingley moment. I don't know if I was watching it live or tape. I don't remember. Here's where I wasn't bothered. Peter, whenever we have a crisis, and I said this earlier, a president calls a governor calls a mayor calls the National Guard. You go to the people with their feet on the ground. I was okay with the league leaning on Sean McDermott, who's saying, hey, guys, my guys can't play. I was okay with that. Now, a lot of people aren't, and they think it should have been immediately canceled. But to me, in crisis, you always lean on the guy that's in the cockpit. You lean on people on the ground. Did it bother you that it seemed to take a while to cancel the game, Peter?
No, not really, Colin. I didn't think there was any way they could play after the ambulance had left and we heard the emergency life-saving techniques that were used. So, I mean, we figured that the game probably was not going to continue. But look, it's to me, it's a little bit crazy in real time to be suggesting call the game with an exclamation point. Take your time, make a reasonable decision, make a reasoned decision, and then let's all move on. That's what I think happened. And look, I don't know what happened. I don't know if Zach Taylor said our guys can't play and McDermott said our guys can't play. We don't know that. So I think it's best in times like this to essentially say, let's let all precincts report first before we go making, decisions before we have all the information.
Peter, let me throw this. I said, out of respect for the Hamlin family, I said, sports have ties. It's just a tie game. There's no space in the schedule. Let's not jam it in. Go to another series of tiebreakers if you have to. That's what baseball does. Baseball came to a conclusion that they didn't have space in their schedule for some of these late season games to figure out who's in. They just go to tiebreakers. What about just saying, out of respect for the family, we're going to make an exception. It's a tie, which it certainly could have been, and just go with the seeding from that point. Does that make sense to you?
Well, I think what makes more sense to me is just to have the Bengals and Bills play 16 games this year. And look, I have no idea what they're going to do. It really isn't the time today to be thinking about this, but it will be the time soon to think about this. And to me, Colin, I'm going to take you back a couple of years. I remember, this is almost 3 years now, because soon after COVID hit, I remember writing and reporting a lot on what the NFL was thinking about the 2020 schedule. They were considering all sorts of alternatives, playing a 12-game schedule, not starting the schedule on time in September, maybe starting in October. They were thinking of everything. And at the time, I remember specifically one leading voice in the NFL telling me, look, this is going to be one of those years. We're going to get through the year. This is going to be one of those years where people really shouldn't care if one team plays 10 games and another team plays 14. Because we are in just an extraordinary time in the history of this country.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see the problem with the Bills and Bengals playing 16 games instead of 17.
Yeah. And,
wherever the games are played, whoever has home field, let's not take this as some outrage if some team goes down a slot in the seedings. Who cares? The Bengals and Bills are both going to the playoffs.
Right.
Where they play their games, I don't care. And they shouldn't either.
Yeah. By the way, Cincinnati got to the Super Bowl playing road games last year. Buffalo's gone to Kansas City and won. I think with the new technology in the helmets, with coaches talking to players, it has eliminated some of the home field advantage. I'm with you. Good teams win. They win on the road. It's interesting. You're a baseball fan. When Steve Cohen bought the Mets, there was concern by other owners that he would literally just spend whatever it takes. And other owners said, that's not what we want here. Well, he's done it. Now the Mets payroll is bigger than the bottom 5 or 6 teams in baseball, and it looks bad for the sport. So when the Walmart owners come into Denver, I think similarly, they don't want to bring in a disruptor. But the salary I'm hearing for Harbaugh is $20 million. I'm hearing it could be more considerably for Sean Payton. And having covered the owners for years, that changes everything. I mean, the average salary is probably 6, 7. I wonder if inside the league that wouldn't play well. Just the $20 million to me was startling when I heard that number. What's your take?
I mean, all power to anybody if they can make whatever they want to make, or whatever they can make. So good for them. But I guess my point would be, I'd be a lot more concerned with, instead of, dangling $20 million out there for Harbaugh or for Payton, my first question would be, okay, we'll get to the money, all right? But I want to have a conversation. What would be your plan to fix Russell Wilson?
Yeah.
Because honestly, Colin, nothing else matters. George Young, the old Giants general manager, the late, great George Young,
yeah.
I used to cover the Giants, and one of the reasons that he hated the idea of free agency coming into the league, this was before free agency was there, he used to tell me, he says, players don't play better for more money. And, he's probably right. And I can tell you, I doubt Jim Harbaugh is going to be a better coach,
right,
whether you pay him $10 million or $20 million. So I want to know, how are you going to fix this quarterback? And if you can fix the quarterback, then let's talk. And we have a lot of money to spend. But Colin, one other thing. He's not the only guy who would be willing to spend a ridiculous amount of money on a head coach. If you look at 3 years ago, what David Tepper did for Matt Rule, people in the NFL thought that was insane. The Giants said, I would never do that. John Mara, I would never pay, $7 or $8 million for a coach who has been in the NFL for 1 year and has just been in college football. So again, look, I think David Tepper, he could get into a contest and spend a lot of money as well. But what does that really mean?
It's obviously we're doing a more somber show today, and we should. The one thing I'd said is, I defended the NFL. They canceled the game. There was a European championship in soccer where a player collapsed, was later stabilized, but 30, 40 minutes later, they continued the game. That feels inappropriate. Troy Vincent saying we told nobody to warm up. People saw Joe Burrow throwing a ball on the sideline. They thought everybody was warming up. They really weren't. But the one thing I pushed back on when it happened is, if you're going to tell me safety matters, then don't take a boatload of money from Amazon and have a Thursday game, or don't add a 17th game, and don't keep playing preseason games. Do you believe, in light of this, that the NFL, those discussions do take place? I'll just lay that out there. Do you think somebody today is saying, we got to look in the mirror a little bit here?
I wish they would, but I doubt it, Colin, because I think what a lot of people around the NFL are going to say is, this kind of tackle happens 200 times a week in the NFL. A guy's heart stopped. It's a freak thing. And again, whether it is or whether it isn't, we'll find out. There's going to be a lot of investigative bodies who are going to look into this. The NFL will, the NFLPA will. But what happens, Colin, if this is simply a freak accident?
Yeah.
Mike Ryan, the NBC injury analyst, he's a former head athletic trainer, told me this morning that he said, listen, you got to remember, let's not draw any conclusions. And he said, there's a high school athlete here in Florida where he lives who got hit with a lacrosse ball, heart stopped, it was resuscitated, and went on to play later in the year. And the only reason his heart stopped, he got hit with the lacrosse ball in his chest.
Yeah.
And maybe the only reason that Damar Hamlin's heart stopped is that he was hit in the exact right location by a 220-pound wide receiver. I just think some things are kind of fluky. I've railed against 17-game schedule forever. It's a dumb thing for a league that cares, or says it cares, about the health and safety of its players. But the other thing is, The NFLPA signed off on it. So I'm not saying that it's all their fault. It's not all anyone's fault. But the NFLPA signed off on it. And so it's going to have to be something that both sides will agree to look at. I wish they would. I doubt they will.
A year ago, somebody, it was a former player, I think, for the Patriots, sent me something. It was some prospectus for a business about safer helmets. And it was kind of fascinating. They had a different look, where there was like ribbing on the outside of the helmet. It was a safer helmet. And I think there's only so much you can do with UFC or car racing. You can put cages in. These cars are going 190 miles an hour around turns. There's only so much you can do. And I think with football, similarly, there's just limitations on what you can do. But I do think, do you believe today, go back 10 years, obviously the game's safer than 30 years ago, but 10 years, do you feel like the game is safer today, that things have been implemented in your coverage?
I think the game is safer, but I do think there's one really important thing that the league plus the helmet manufacturers are working on, which I think, talking to people in the industry, would be a gigantic help, and that is position-specific helmets. In other words, for a quarterback, where you make the padding a little heavier, where you build out the model a little bit more, is in the back of the head. So that you see when Tua Tagovailoa twice this year has gotten hurt, theoretically, if when the head springs back to hit the ground, if you have more protection, it's going to cause less brain trauma. And so that is something that I think the NFL needs to fast track and get in the league as soon as possible.
That's really smart, actually. Peter King is joining us, NBCSports.com. You've been covering this league for so long. Have you ever seen anything resembling last night? Darryl Stingley, you started back in '84. I don't remember even what year it was with Stingley. Have you ever seen anything?
Yeah, that was Stingley was pre-me.
Okay.
Yeah, Stingley was pre-me, pre-'84. But I really have not seen anything like that. And what made it so different, Colin, is sort of the frenetic pace for a few of the medical professionals there.
Yeah.
That you just sensed when the camera was on them for a short period of time. Hey, let's go. This is This is not precautionary. This is the real drill. And also the tears on the players. Players are used to seeing guys tear ACLs or whatever on the field. They're used to, in practice, if a guy gets hurt, the coach moves the drill 20 yards away and they just keep going. They're used to that. They're not used to somebody whose heart stops on the field and whose life is in danger. They're not used to that. Nobody is. We've never seen it before.
All right. Peter King, NBCSports.com. Thank you for joining us. Covered the NFL since the early 80s. Thank you, Peter.
Okay, Colin.
There are some sports bits today. Nick Wright joining us next hour. I saw this story this morning. Tom Brady said it would bother him to sit out a meaningless Week 18 finale. So Tom Brady wants to play. That's why I said earlier with Jalen Hurts, you don't ask the player if they're healthy. You go to the doctor first, then you go to a player, then you go to coaches. Tom Brady, 45 years, 7 rings, would be bothered not playing a meaningless game. You have to talk players sometimes out of hurting themselves or putting themselves in harm's way. So also, David Carr is defending his brother Derek. Raiders are going to trade him. It's done. It's official. They're going to move off him. His brother is saying it. He does not like the lack of loyalty by the Raiders for his brother, because Derek Carr often said it's all he ever wanted to be was a Raider. But when your bosses tell you they don't like you, it's amazing how competitive and invigorated a pro athlete can be. Derek Carr to the Jets feels so right. Not great enough to overcome chaos, but that's a good roster, a very good defensive coach, a smart GM, suboptimal owners, but Jets Derek Carr feels like, to me, it's a really good fit. Nick.